Okay, so we're about to start, I think. I want to welcome you to our session 3A, Beyond Environmental Assessment Towards Ecosystem-Based Maritime Spatial Planning, that has been very well organized and coordinated by Christina and Joanna. So thank you very much for everything and for this exciting conference. For those who don't know me, I'm Helena Calado. I'm based here at the very beautiful islands of the Azores, and today very sunny islands, which is not very common. And I'm based at the University of the Azores at San Miguel University campus. And directly to our point, this session aims to go through some points that are hugely important for those that are practitioners of MSP, but not only that, to researchers and academics. And it will go through the importance of transboundary arrangements for ecosystem-based management. This in relation to the different components that articulate the ecosystem-based management approach to its application on maritime special planning process. And focus on different aspects as governance, monitoring, and coherence with other directives, as for instance, the Marine Strategy Framework Directive, or with marine green infrastructure. And we will also address cumulative effects assessment in a sense where it can be a way to address ecosystem-based management. So this is our main aim, to address this role of cumulative impacts in strategical environmental assessment. And now these elements together can be applied to operationalize the ecosystem-based management approach into MSP, including some transboundary issues. Just some points before we start, just to clarify how this session will unfold. We have some very good speakers and some very good presentations for you, but we want also you to get involved in our discussions. And in order to do that, we have some options. But first of all, let me remind you that this session is being recorded. So I hope everyone is okay with it. This is, of course, a means to be more feasible to afterwards draw conclusions and write them and make them available for the entire community. So that being said, the rules to participation are very simple. You have in your buttons, in your tools, you have the Q&A button, and we would like you to address the question directly to one of the speakers. If not, then please state to all of them, but please put your question very short and very directly, because we don't have too much time, so let's be very focused. So start with the name of the speaker that you want to address. And for instance, if you want to address Marta, just put to Marta and then put the question very clear and very short. But then again, at the end, as you've seen on the chat already, you also have the chance to continue this discussion and inputting your thoughts on this in the Padlet. So this doesn't end here, this discussion, and all your inputs are very welcome. And also, if we cannot address all your questions in the chat, we'll try to address them later. I think Christina and Adriano will be able to do that in short after this session, but if not, later on, we will do our best. When I say we, I say Christina and Adriano, of course. Then we also have the chance of Slido. So you will be explained through it. Slido is a very easy tool to use. Here we have two options. You have the option of the QR code and entering to the website of Slido, but we'll give you specific instructions when that option is available. The questions are very focused and direct, and we will discuss them and the results and the sum up of your answers at the end of the session on the discussion time. So I think this is it for now. As for my instructions, I would like, of course, the speakers to keep on time. I will not interrupt you, but 1 minute before I will raise my hand that you probably will not see because you are too focused on your presentation. Nevertheless, when your time is due, I will interrupt you saying that you have to wrap up. I'm sorry to do this, but I was commanded to do it. So let's go. I'll give the floor to who really matters today, which are the speakers and you that will help us through the discussion. And first of all, we have Marta Virgilio, that represents the Regional Fund for Science and Technology on the Azores. The Regional Fund for Science and Technology has long coordinated projects, and some of them in this field. And the latest one was the Mars project, which has given us some very good outcomes in this subject. So Marta, that is a PhD from the University of the Azores, she will present us MSP advances on the European outermost regions, the importance of cooperation initiatives for ecosystem-based management. And I give it to you, Marta. Thank you.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Elena, for the nice introduction. On behalf of the Regional Fund for Science and Technology, I want to thank the organizers of the SIMAtlantic Final Conference for inviting us. As Elena said, we were challenged to present MSP advances in outermost regions and the importance of cooperation initiatives for ecosystem-based management. And I will give you a short overview on this topic in the European Micronesia, based on two projects, one of which is the MARSP project, as Elena also said. Next slide, please. So the first project, the MARSP, Micronesian Maritime Spatial Planning, was a 2-year project implemented in 2018 and 2019 with a consortium of 9 partners, and addressing 3 outermost regions from 2 member states. With the obligation to implement the MSP directive, the main objectives of the project were to reinforce MSP in European Micronesian archipelagos, Azores and Madeira from Portugal, and the Canary Islands from Spain, by assisting their competent authorities on promoting the development of MSP operative mechanisms. And also, the objective was to provide adequate management tools adapted to the regional, environmental, and socioeconomic settings in each of those Micronesian archipelagos. Next slide, please. As many other projects, the MARSP project structure included several work packages, as you can see in the figure, including coordination and communication. Considering the commonalities between the 3 regions, but also the different individual interests and the different status in each regional MSP process. For example, at that time, Madeira was almost approving its plan, while in the Canaries, the process was just beginning. All technical work packages made efforts on implementing a common approach between regions. The stakeholder engagement process, for example, was based on similar guidelines in the 3 regions, and stakeholders actually participated in the definition of the vision and objectives for the MSP process in each region, and they also participated along the rest of the project activities. In what concerns international cooperation, we had a work package devoted to this topic, Micronesian cross-border cooperation, which developed activities addressing the 3 archipelagos, again, describing and analyzing Micronesian MSP framework, and also promoting the cross-border cooperation for sustainable growth of maritime economies of Madeira and Canaries towards the sustainable use of their marine resources. And it also integrated the Azores region to promote cooperation, considering the regional borders within the same country. Next slide, please. As main outputs from this work package and the international cooperation efforts, I would like to highlight the set of policy recommendations that came out from this work package and the whole project. and also a proposal of a pilot program for cross-border cooperation that you can see represented in the figure at the right. And this pilot program identified common strategic goals for the Macaronesian region, with strategic actions for each goal and lines of actions to implement them. This also seemed to have consensus among stakeholders in the Macaronesia, as you can see in the graph at the left, when they were asked about the issues of greater interest for Macaronesian cooperation and how to develop them. Next slide, please. For the mission of promoting coherence between MSP processes in the entire marine region, I would like to highlight a few guidelines. The European Macaronesia seen as a shared sea and a social ecological system with common elements in the ecosystems, as ecosystems do not have administrative boundaries, especially in a relatively small region as this one in the Macaronesia, and social, cultural, and political administrative dimensions. Cooperating from what binds us together and from the European principles of integration, respecting the different interests and singularities, but without forgetting that our future is connected, and also reinforcing the role of both states by joining efforts in the future of these outermost regions. I would also highlight the need to engage and empower insular communities. In the end, local actors are the ones using the maritime space and natural resources. Increasing their commitment in the MSP process will for sure, at least I do believe it, will also increase their commitment to achieve MSP goals and decrease conflicts. And I think it can also contribute for the success of the ecosystem approach in MSP, as it also depends on participation and international cooperation. Next slide, please. Following the MARSP project and the need to advance the MSP implementation in the Macaronesia, the European Commission approved also the MSP or project, which is quite recent. It's called Advancing Maritime Spatial Planning in Outermost Regions and has just started this month. This project will run for 3 years, joining 12 partners, mostly from governmental agencies. This new project includes 1 more outermost region and 1 more member state, which is French Guiana from France, and curiously is not an island region. But I hope and I do believe this will benefit also the international cooperation challenge, discussion, and also outputs from the project. MSPR main objectives are at this point to support MSP competent authorities in Portugal, for Azores and Madeira, and also Spain, Canary Islands, advancing the implementation of their MSP processes launched with the previous MARSP project, and in France, to French Guiana, on advancing with knowledge, providing grounds to launch and adopting the principles of MSP, and also to support improvement of international cooperation on MSP, ensuring coherent and coordinated maritime spatial plans, including the application of the ecosystem-based approach in MSP. Next slide, please. As you may know, the concept of ecosystem-based approach appeared as an alternative to the previous traditional sectoral management approach, which revealed to be fragmented and failed in preserve many marine ecosystems. The ecosystem-based approach requires engagement and participation, but mostly cooperation and the adoption of a common and agreed strategy between regions and authorities and remaining actors involved to ensure an integrated answer in attempting to keep the pressure of human activities within the limits of the good environmental status. MSPR will then have the ecosystem-based approach as baseline and has an objective throughout the project, but this concept will be more prominent in some activities. For example, work package 2, ocean governance for outermost region platform, for example, will provide a trustful arena for discussion, knowledge sharing and capacity building on ocean governance in the context of MSP ecosystem based for the 3 member states, promoting cooperation and trying to find common solutions. Within work package 3, filling gaps linked with ongoing MSP processes, the MARSP legacy will provide knowledge sharing and capacity building among partners, but also promoting knowledge transfer to other outermost regions when possible. And the entire work package for ecosystem approach to regional MSP challenges will focus on implementing the ecosystem approach concept. The concept of marine green infrastructure will be applied and tested in two outermost regions, Canaries and French Guiana, and will be validated with experts' opinion to identify gaps, needs, and opportunities of improvement. Case studies of planning downscaling will be developed in the Azores and French Guiana, and a coherent implementation of MSP and environmental directives will be downscaled to a practical case of planning maritime sector in Canaries. This will also provide detailed analysis of the requirements, measures, and obligations emerging from the different directives. All the results are intended to be presented and to be discussed with the stakeholders. Next slide, please, which is the last one, Elena. Thank you. So this is it from my side so far. Next steps on MSP or coming soon. I hope you can join us also in this journey. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Elena.
Thank you very much, Marta, for keeping on time. So this is time now to show us the instructions for joining using Slido. So as I said before, you have two options. Either you scan this QR code, or you can go to www.slide.do. And there you will be requested a code that you have to digit this one, cardinal 904386. And then the first question will pop up to you. And the question is related to this to this intervention, and it will ask you to choose 3 aspects you think that are more important when operationalizing ecosystem-based management in maritime spatial planning. You can choose up to 3 of these suggestions, and of course, later on, you can also add your inputs in Padlet or in the chat if you think some of the options that you want to are not here. So please take a minute to go to Slido. We will continue to our next speaker, but I would like you to have some moments to join Slido. If you have any problems joining Slido, please put your problems in the chat and we will try to address them, okay? Okay, so let's go to, we will come up later on, as I said, to discuss your answers to this question. But now let's move to Monica Campillos, that is representing the Institute of Spanish Oceanography, the Spanish Institute of Oceanography. And she will bring us a presentation on the cumulative effects on strategic environmental assessment. So Monica has only 5 minutes, I think. I will be a bit generous, but not too much. Okay, Monica, thank you. I hand it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Elena. Good afternoon to everyone. So I will make a short presentation introducing the cumulative effect assessment and strategic environmental assessment concept and its relationship to MSP. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the definition of the concept of cumulative effect assessment, strategic environmental assessment, and ecosystem services. I will go quickly to the definition because I prefer focus my presentation on the following slides. In addition, I don't have enough time to it. So regarding this definition, cumulative effect assessment is a procedure to identify and evaluate the significant effects from pressures or activities. So strategic environmental assessment is a process of assessing environmental implication of plans and programs, and ecosystem services are those benefits that humans derive from ecosystem functions, for example, supporting services or cultural services. Next slide, please. So these three contents mentioned in the previous slides are part of the ecosystem-based management. So they are in relationship to MSP. So related to cumulative effects, we are defining like changes in the environment that are caused by an action in combination with other past, present, and future human actions are a key aspect of MSP. So in this sense, cumulative effect assessment requires data to identify and assess the direct or indirect interactions between maritime activities. So the objective of cumulative effect assessments is to understand the causes, the impacts, and it helps to the decision-making scenarios of spatial and temporal effects of the causes identified. Other thing to highlight is that currently in the European Union, there's not a methodology or a protocol or guidance on cumulative effect assessment. So there is no a common approach between member states. So this could be an obstacle for transboundary cooperation. So applying cumulative effect assessment and strategic environmental assessment is the best way to ensure the interactions between human activities and the marine ecosystem. So in this sense, ecosystem-based approach is fundamental for MSP. Next slide, please. So in the scope of SIMAtlantic project in theme 3, a survey on cumulative effect and impact assessment and also for strategic environmental assessment practices was developed at national level. The main objective of this survey was to identify approaches and methodologies used by different countries regarding these concepts related to MSP. So this survey was sent to field by the competent authorities and also for the participants in SIMAtlantic project. On the other hand, a bibliography review was done to analyze some examples of these concepts related to MSP process. So this result of the literature review and also for the survey was used to elaborate the deliverable that you could see in the slide, that is this cumulative impact and strategic assessment literature review, which could be consulted in SIMAtlantic website. Next, please. So some of the results from the bibliography review was the identification of challenges and opportunities by several authors and experts who have underlined some of the limitations and opportunities for applying a strategic environmental assessment, cumulative effects, or impact assessment, and also for environmental services in an ecosystem based in MSP, such as those one described in the table that you could see in this slide and in the following slide. So as you could see in this slide, there are some challenges highlighted for the three concepts. For example, the complexity of models, the data availability, or the uncertain. Meanwhile, other challenges has been underlined just for one concept. For example, the challenges for the interpretation of the result or the open access to the tool developed, which has been only highlighted for cumulative effect impact assessment. Next, please. And this is the last one. This table is a summary related to challenges and opportunities evaluated. To highlight some results of this table, for instance, you could see how cumulative effect assessment is an important part for stakeholders' involvement in the processing planning by working hand in hand on tool development with common basis in mind that could be used for MSP decision making. Another example related to sectoral approaches to assessment, we're developing methodologies to promote and integrate analysis for cumulative impact or ecosystem services. So as I said before, if you want more information from this deliverable, you could go to the SIMAtlantic website and download the document. So that's all from my side, and thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much, Monica. Let me go again to the Slido. You can join from your PC or from your cell phone. It's rather easy. You have two options. You have the QR code, or you can join at slido.com. You need to introduce this code when arriving. It's cardinal 904386. And we would like you to we'd like you to go to the first question, those of you that have not answered, because we are screening the inputs, and please go to the first question if you don't mind, and choose the 3 aspects you think are more important when operationalizing ecosystem-based management in MSP. And then let's go to the question related to the presentation that Monica gave us just now, which is, in which step of the MSP process would you conduct a cumulative effects assessment? You can choose 2 options at least, and please put your input, and don't forget that you still have the Q&A button. You can direct questions directly to our speakers. Just put the name and the short question, and afterwards you can also join the discussion on Padlet. So again, it's hugely important that you will join us in one of the means that we have, either answering our questions on Slido or using the Q&A, but please participate on this in order to have a fruitful discussion at the end. Okay, so with that being said, I will give some more minutes to answer the Slido. I think you will be able to see the two questions if you have not answered the first one, and then answer the first and the second. But even if you can see the first, then join and answer this one. Okay, so now we are on the subject of cumulative effects assessment, and we'll keep on that subject. Let's pass to Maria da Luz, which I think represents the University of Aveiro. I forgot to tell you that Monica represented a partner on the SIMAtlantic project, as well as it's now Maria da Luz. So the EO and the University of Aveiro are partners on SIMAtlantic. Marta was representing another project. So that being said, let's pass to Maria da Luz, that will present us a cross-border cumulative effects assessment, the Northwestern Iberian Peninsula, methodology and lessons learned. Thank you, Maria da Luz, and I hand it over to you.
Thank you, Elena. Good afternoon to everyone. Next slide, please. So I'm here on behalf of the group for the case study, showing our experience on the cross-border cumulative effects assessment for the Northwestern Iberian Peninsula. So today I'm focusing on methodology and lessons learned. Next, please. The goal of this case study is to propose a methodology to assess cumulative effects at a transboundary scale. So our study area was the north region of Portugal, bordering with the Galician province of Spain, as you can see in the map on the right. We have selected some activities only from the availables in order to keep some coherence between both sides of the border. And we have selected not only, next slide, please. We have selected not only current activities, which are aquaculture, dredging disposal, renewable energies, fishing, and maritime transport, but also some future activities to be implemented in the case of the Portuguese side of the border. So we used the MESP Portuguese plan, which was already available, and we selected some of those activities. And they are aquaculture, dredging disposal, renewable energies, and artificial reefs. So next slide, please. We also identified the ecosystem components. We selected 3 functional groups, which were cetaceans, seabirds, and marine turtles. And in order, as we didn't have much information also on the distribution of these species, and as they are highly movable species, we have defined an analysis area outside of the study area, as you can see on the map on the right. And we use this area as virtually having these species. So we mapped them as presence, absence all over this area, a little bit like Schrodinger's cat. Next slide, please. We also identified the habitats present in the area, and we used the Marine Strategy Framework Directive broad habitats designations. They also mapped it as presence, absence. Next slide, please. And then from the activities that we had, we derived the pressures also using the MSFD designations. We used a previous published study that made the linkage between activities and pressures. After identifying the pressures, next slide, please. We also identified their, sorry, a little bit back. We have identified the influence distance of these pressures. So they could range from local to influencing to till 100 kilometers distance. We also identified the intensity of the pressures, which could range from low to high. This was 1 to 3. What this meant was that for the same pressure, let's say input of anthropogenic sound, we could have, if it was coming from an aquaculture, a value of 1, or if it was coming from maritime transport, a value of 3. And then we did it. Next slide, please. So after we had a moment with a group of experts where we handed a questionnaire and we made a workshop in order to assess the sensitivity of the ecosystem components to each of the pressures. We handed a questionnaire where the experts could rate the interaction between the pressures and the ecosystems, and it could range from no response or there was a negligible effect on the taxa, or no change or negligible effect on the habitats, and it could go until very high mortality or permanent destruction or change of the habitat. We received all these results, and we compiled a sensitivity score after this expert judgment moment. Next slide, please. So then we had all the information we needed to compile our cumulative impacts index. We made a grid of 1 by 1 kilometer for pressures and ecosystems components, and the cumulative impact would be the resulting sum of the product of all pressures on all ecosystems given a combination of intensity and sensitivity scores. So this was the result we were having, and I'm going to show you in the next slide, please, the preliminary results that we obtained with this methodology. So just to say, these results were not validated. This is just to illustrate how to use the methodology, and these are maps that illustrate how the cumulative impacts would be resulting. So here you can see for the current situation, on the right, you have on the left, sorry, you have the Portuguese cumulative impacts. At the center, you have the Spanish results for the cumulative impacts on the current situation. And at the right, you have the combination of both countries for the current situation. Next slide, please. Here you can see for, sorry, a little bit behind, please. The slide before. Yeah, so here you can see the current and potential situation for Portugal. And in the left, at the center, it's the same map as before for Spain, the current situation. And at the right, you can see the summing up of the current situation for Portugal and Spain, and also the potential situation for Portugal. You can see in the reddish areas are the areas with higher impact. And you can also see, of course, that the impact spread as long as 100 kilometers from the study area. So you can follow our website and our social media, where we soon will be posting more results, the deliverables, some final maps, more information on the methodology, and we will also be making a cross-check with the MPAs present in the area. So please stay tuned. So next slide, please. Okay, so here I would like to draw your attention. This was a slide where we tried to distill all our experience in this case study and for future lessons learned and for future assessments. So we divided this into three issues: spatial data, experts' knowledge, and methodology. So from our experience, we already adopted some of these lessons while we were developing the case study. And these are the ones that are in bold in the slide. So regarding spatial data, for example, we really followed the precautionary approach. For example, we didn't have much information about the species, so we had to follow a precautionary approach and consider that they could be virtually anywhere in the study area. It was an exaggeration of reality, but we used it on to be on the safe side of the information. And of course, it's also important to have, since the beginning, a coherent data sharing protocol, since we are talking about transferring information and the data from both sides of the border. So it really has to be some transparency here. And we're also in the moment where we're doing expert knowledge, where we were joining with experts to make the assessment of the sensitivity and radius. This was a moment where we really had space for improvements and to improve the overall strategy and engagement. We understood that it would be very relevant for future assessments to have a priori definition of the minimum number of participants that are necessary to have consistent results, so that you can say in the end that you can make some assessment and that you have statistically significant results. And also when you are choosing your experts, and make sure that you have a coherent proportion of experts by each ecological component. So you don't end up with a score that is completely biased to one habitat or to one species and not representing well the others. And of course, if you consider always to show the uncertainty associated with the numbers and with the information that you are providing to the public. It's really important to have the maps of the information about how certain you are or not about these results. From the expert side, they really told us that it would be interesting and really relevant to have all the information available on habitats and pressures, so they can give the most of information and be really secure about the scores they are giving. And of course, to have a clear connection between pressures and habitats. Finally, if all this fails, use a precautionary approach and really be really precautionaries on the radius, choose the highest score, be on the safe side. Finally, on the methodology, from our experience, it was really relevant to have data that could be compared from both sides of the border. And this was the case, for example, for the MSFD habitats classification. It really made our job easier because there was a continuous between borders, and this is not always the case. Although it's the reality, you cannot always represent it like this. So having the MSFD habitats classification really made the job easier. And it was really relevant to have considering the same activities on both sides of the border. And for example, when we had maritime transport, we tried to select only the core areas from intensity maps, and we did it on both sides equally, so to improve the coherence of the case study. Finally, include more land sea interaction in activities, and for potential and future activities, we really consider the construction phase, because this is the phase where a lot of impacts occur and they are really relevant for the future of the ecosystems. And finally, that said, I would just like to highlight this is the beginning of these fields of cumulative impacts and MESP. And as we move on, we acquire more information, better information, we will be able to produce more robust results and provide maps with which we are more confident, and they will be able to better support the MESP. Finally, of course, as well, when we are all in the same stage, it will be easier also to do these exercises. For example, when we have MESPs in place, we can be better assessing the future activities and the future impacts that we will have in the study areas. I think that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. So just a few comments. We do have now a live discussion on the Q&A, which is great. Thank you for your questions. Some of them are for Maria. She is going to answer them now along with Adriano, I think. So she has just finished. She will answer these questions. And that's the second introduction to this cumulative effect assessment. And I'm sorry that we had given so little time to Monica, but I think she has highlighted the questions. And as Maria said, as we have more and more expertise on this, it will become easier. But actually, now is the moment that we are in most need for these assessments, because as you know, the first round of MSP in Europe is about to close, or should be about to close, because the directive asks for it on its deadlines. And it will be hugely interesting to see how this unfolds, and also how this will inform the next round of MSP. That, of course, will be driven by the new EU goals, at least at the EU biodiversity strategy and offshore wind and the offshore energy strategy. So it will be really interesting to see how these cumulative effects or cumulative impacts assessment will help shaping the process in the near future. Let's go to our new Slido question. I will give some more time now, because I think I've been rushing people to answer, but not giving them enough time to answer. So the question is, what would you do if you didn't have enough data to conduct the analysis, which is something that Maria de Luz has referred to also. They have been very cautious and adopting the precautionary principle, but you have other options, and please help us join these discussions so we can at the end give some or more options on what can we do when we don't have enough data. I think most of the people will be with me when we say we never have enough data. We always want more data, but still decisions are needed, and we need to take actions. So when you don't have data, how will we conduct this cumulative impacts or cumulative effects assessment? Again, it's easy to join Slido. You can opt to go through your laptop or through your cell phone, your smartphone or cell phone. My cell phone is not very smart, but go and scan the QR code or join at slido.com and introduce the code that is there. So that being said, Christine has again put the connection on the chat. I remember you that you can use the Q&A, and please direct your questions to a panelist, or if you want to address them, I'll just state that. Okay, I think we had enough time to answer our question on Slido, and I think we might be good to move on to Adele. And again, we'll remain on the subject of cumulative effects. And Adele is coming from the Agri-Food and Bioscience Institute for Northern Ireland. Again, SIMAtlantic partner. And she will bring us, I'm not sure how to pronunciate this, so if I don't say it correctly, please forgive me. The Carlingford Loch transboundary, it's a transboundary experience on cumulative effects assessment. And I will hand it to you, Adele, please.
Thank you, Helena. Yes, so I'm from AFBI, which stands for the Agri-Food and Biosciences Institute in Northern Ireland, and we're a non-departmental public body which sit under the Department of Agriculture, Environmental and Rural Affairs within Northern Ireland. So I'm just going to talk to you about some of the work that we've been doing within Carlingford Loch. Three main pieces of work where we're kind of moving from cumulative environmental impacts and effects through to kind of more a web-based system, and then looking at some work that we're doing at the moment on ecosystem-based management and how we're kind of adding into that. So next slide, please. So this is Carlingford Loch. It's one of the 2 transboundary sea lochs that we have in Northern Ireland, and it borders County Louth in the Republic of Ireland and Counties Antrim and Armagh in Northern Ireland. So the sea loch has a wide variety of different users and stakeholders, from NGOs, conservation authorities. There's an active aquaculture industry, as well as a fishing industry, and there's ports and harbours and a lot of recreational yachting and boating that goes on there as well. So the next slide, please, will just show us. So what this map that show on the right-hand side will show, or sorry, left-hand side, shows a lot of the conservation designations within Northern Ireland, the marine ones within Northern Ireland. So as you can see, our coastline is quite covered and quite well protected. So within Carlingford Loch on the Northern Irish side, the area within our Northern Irish jurisdiction, we have a special protection area for birds, and we also have a marine conservation zone as well. So it was in that respect that the Department of Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs in Northern Ireland asked AFBI to undertake a cumulative impact assessment of aquaculture activities on the conservation features of these designated habitats and sites. So next slide, please. I'm just going to kind of talk you through how we went about doing this. So I just have to say that this work was undertaken in 2015. So the boxes on the map show the licensed aquaculture sites. This is as it was at the time. This is slightly changed in the last few years, so there's more up-to-date layers. So the aquaculture industry within Carlingford Loch is mainly Pacific oysters and blue mussels. The blue mussels are bottom cultured and in the subtidal zone, and the Pacific oysters are on trestles in the intertidal zone. So it's kind of hard to show the impacts of a bottom culture industry that operates by boats. So what we've done is we've collected the black box data from all these vessels, which gives us a ping of their GPS position. It's every 5 to 15 minutes. And we've looked at that over various years, and we've kind of done an analysis in GIS looking at a density distribution. So the more red and darker colors show the areas where there's been more pings per the density of activity per square kilometre. So this shows us where there's been more activity on the aquaculture sites. And then the map on the right hand side, it shows some of the wetland bird survey data for the protected species within Carlingford Loch. This is for Brent geese. So again, the different colours show the different densities of birds within the area at that time period, that winter. So if you show the next slide, please. We can then this is just some of the analysis we've done. We then overlap all this data within our GIS to show like a GIS spatial assessments of the area. So the map on the left shows the conservation designations. It has the seal haulite sites. It has zostera layers for this another protected species in the intertidal zone. And we have some of the islands where the Arctic tern birds are located, and they are protected for their breeding grounds. So this is some of the ways we can look and see how the aquaculture activities could potentially be impacting on these conservation designation areas. Now the map on the right hand side represents other carrying capacity work that we undertook as part of this assessment. We're very fortunate in Northern Ireland in that through the 2007 SMILE project, which stands for Sustainable Mariculture in Northern Irish Loch Ecosystems. We were able to develop an aquaculture carrying capacity model for all of our sea lochs. So this combines, it's a 3D hydrodynamic model and scaled up to an ecological ecosystem model, which has shellfish feeding models embedded in it. So we can look at what the shellfish aquaculture is removing from the water column and how that impacts on wild species within the area. Obviously, wild species then can show us an indication of the ecosystem health. So this is just showing us areas where there's room for expansion of aquaculture and areas where the aquaculture could have been more of a drawdown of phytoplankton and food availability for the wild species. So this is what we started off with, and this was resulted in a document that's on the DAERA website, which showed all our analysis on the potential impacts of aquaculture and all these conservation designations. And we made some recommendations to the department then. So the next slide, we're going to see how we're taking this further from just a paper document to how we can use kind of some of the data that we've gathered within this. So through the Aquaspace project, which was a Horizon 2020 funded project, which ran in 2015 to 2018, it was the aim of the project was the ecosystem approach to making space for aquaculture. So then we were able to work with some of the project partners. To go to the next slide, please. To look at developing a locational tool, a site selection tool within Carlingford Loch as to how we can use all this data to see how you could plan other marine activities, using this to inform marine spatial planning for aquaculture licensing to begin with. So the Aquaviz model was originally developed in Norway as a sea lice tracking, sea lice dispersion model. So we decided to use Carlingford Loch as a case study because we had all the information, loads of data from the cumulative impact assessments that we'd undertaken previously. So we were working with partners within the Aquaspace project in the Institute of Marine Research and the Christian Michelsen Research within Norway, who had developed the Aquaviz model originally to see if we could put in place a decision support tool for aquaculture within Carlingford Loch. So this was to be like a very web-based, user-friendly tool. Now we'll see from the next slide, please. So this just shows a screenshot of what the model looks like. So we've input a lot of the layers that were gathered through the GIS project work that was done within the cumulative impact assessment work. And we can then now start to set actual limits and targets. So we could say the depth that you needed for an aquaculture site, we could say what the distance you had to be from certain designated features and species. And it produced a traffic light system. So if any, you can actually put a virtual farm on the site. So you can, anywhere on the map, the user can select what type of aquaculture site that they wanted, and they can put it on the map, and the model will calculate the distance based on the parameters we've been given it. So this then gives you an indication whether or not you've picked, what the activity you've picked is suitable for the area you've picked. Again, this can be used for not just aquaculture, for marine spatial planning in lots of different areas, but it was just produced as a demonstrator model for aquaculture in Carlingford as part of this project. And the results of that have since recently been published in the Journal of Ocean and Coastal Management. So now the next slide, I'm going to show how we've kind of taken this a next stage forward to look more on the holistic as to everything that impacts the whole ecosystem. So we're looking at more of a catchment to coast, kind of like source to sea type management now, because anything that happens in a river is ultimately that ends up in our sea. So this is a project called SWELL. It's the Shared Waters Enhancement and Loch Legacy project. It's a 35 million EU funded project. And we're looking to improve water quality within Carlingford Loch and Loch Foyle through upgrades of water utility and wastewater facilities. So this is working with the water companies within Northern Ireland and Ireland. So it's Irish Water and Northern Ireland Water, as well as the Lochs Agency, which is a cross-border agency. And we've got EBR, Eastern Border Region, who are kind of a finance procurement partners. So if you go to the next slide, please. Joanna, can you start it, please, Joanna? Oh, it was started right, sorry, thank you. Sorry, so this is just talk you through exactly what we're doing with the models. So we're modeling the pathways of nutrients and contaminants throughout the systems. So we're looking at everything at the start of the catchments through stream decay, nutrient cycling, and how it all leaches to groundwater. Sorry, this is a bit jerky playing of the system. Then we're looking also at the contributions from agriculture. We're taking in fertilization regimes, runoff, grazing, and agricultural practices. We're also including in the models all sort of industrial pollutants and stream transport, anything that comes from them. And then also included in these models are the urban areas and the inputs from the water utilities drainage area models. So everything that comes out of the water companies, the treatment works, is modelled and included in this. This all feeds into then our sea loch model. So we have a shellfish growth model, which is aquashell. So we're looking at whatever the shellfish and wild ant cultures take out of the water column and what they then put back in. And we have a 3D hydrodynamic model, which looks at the circulation and how all the nutrients and contaminants are transported throughout the system. So this is all project web. So this is all then available to help. I'm sorry, next slide, please. So this just shows how this all model works. This is a multi-model cascade. So our catchment models, we're using the soil and water assessment tool SWAT models. And we have the wastewater utilities drainage area models feed into these to provide all the data from the treatment works. And these feed into the Delft 3D hydrodynamic model, which then all gets scaled up to an eco-wind ecological model, which also is nestled in that, the shellfish growth models and a farm scale aquaculture model. So I'm just going to wrap up now. Next slide, please. So next few slides are quite quick, just to show you that underpinning all these models, we have a very extensive sampling program within the catchment, both in the marine and the freshwater. And the next slide, please. So we're also then putting marine real-time instrumentation in the sea lock to be able to get real-time data on the nutrients and contaminants. We're looking at E. coli, we're looking at nitrogen, phosphate, ammonia, to name just a few, as well as chlorophyll A. So the final slide will just give you an idea as to what these whole legacy models are hoping to be used for. So there's also, as well as the ecosystem-based management, to help promote decision-making and to help regulators set consent standards. That's it. Thank you very much.
Okay, so thank you very much, Adele, and I draw your attention. You already had a question. I have a question on Q&A. So before handing your presentation, you're already requested to come up for the discussion. Now what we're going to do is we're going to answer our last question on Slido. So it's again a very direct question, very focused. In your opinion, what qualities should a cumulative effect assessment have in order to inform an MSP process? And of course, you can choose two options, and on other, you can input more of your insights into the Padlet, for instance, to continue the discussion afterwards, or you can also put it on chat, whatever way you choose. Just give us your insights. It will help draw better and robust conclusions out of this. Again, you can enter through your laptop or your smartphone, scan the QR code, or go to slido.com. So I think I will give you some minutes for this. What we'll do next is we will see the answers to these questions and direct them to the panelists that has presented before the question was posed. And we'll ask that panelist to comment on your answers. And of course, at the end, again, feel free to join on Padlet with your other questions and other insights. We have 4 panelists and 4 questions, and we need a minute to change from this presentation to the answers of the Slido. We will move for the first answers and for the first questions. And so I remind you, the first question was to choose 3 aspects you think are more important when operationalizing ecosystem-based management in maritime spatial planning. So it's not that as if we don't know what ecosystem-based management should be, but put it in practice, sometimes it's a little bit more difficult. And we have given you some choices on governance, nested approach to scales, cumulative effect assessment, strategic environmental assessment, and ecosystem services and marine green infrastructure. Now, if we move to your answers, we see that it's more or less even between governance, cumulative effect assessment, and strategic environmental assessment as the aspects that are more important to operationalize ecosystem-based management in MSP. That being said, that's very interesting that cumulative effect assessment and strategic environmental assessment are kind of tools with we know that we have to improve them, but methodologies do exist. While governance, it's a very wide aspect, and it can include a series of things in it. Then we have the ecosystem services, and marine and green infrastructure comes at second place because the other three are even. And at the end, nested approach to scales, analysis scales, and management scales. So as Martha was the first speaker, I would like Martha to comment on this, but if any of the other speakers wants to comment this, please just raise your hand and we will go briefly. Okay, Martha, let's hear you.
Thank you, Elena. So my feeling is that it's quite difficult to choose, even if there are three, it's quite difficult to choose because all of them have implications in the process. But once you have to choose, I definitely agree with the governance, including the international governance framework. One of the constraints identified during the Mars project was the difference in governance structures between countries and even between regions, with implications in the way that competent authorities take decisions and manage the maritime space and activities. So to advance ecosystem-based management in these fragmented territories has outermost regions, the more similar the governance structures are, the easier the cooperation process should be. Then it was quite difficult for me to choose between cumulative effect assessment and strategic environmental assessment, because I think they might be quite connected. Ideally, strategic environmental assessment takes into account the other ones, both knowledge on ecosystems and their services, and also cumulative effect assessment, to ensure reliable results and allow better decisions on selecting trade-offs between environmental, economic, and social objectives. I would also choose the nested approach to scales, as finding the most appropriate scale of analysis is particularly relevant in the marine environment. And it is as it is a very dynamic and multifunctional system, and natural resources and human activities also are usually beyond national maritime borders. But in the end, I think we need to have in mind that all the options are very relevant, and we should try at least to include and to develop each one the best way possible.
Thank you, Marta. I would like to hear from the practice, and the practice here is represented by the other speakers. So Adriano, Maria da Luz, Monica, and Adele, do you have something to add to this, please? We can start by the order of presentation. Monica, in your works, did you find do you find that these results respond to your concerns?
The thing is that, and related probably with the following question, is that there's no currently a methodology or protocol for cumulative effect assessment for the whole member states. So, and in addition, strategic environmental assessment is a mandatory thing for European Union. So it's not easy to manage both things. According to have an homogeneous status for the MSP process in the whole Europe. So I think these kind of projects are a good example to how to try to homogenize the methodologies, or trying to be coordinated in this kind of procedures for in this application for MSP.
Thank you, Monica. Yes, in fact, the standards, the methodology standards for a series of processes have been addressed by almost all of you. That's something that will come back later. So Maria da Luz and Adele, do you want to add something to this, to the answers, to the analysis of the answers to this question?
Thank you, Elena. I think I agree in general with what has been said by Marta and by Monica. Yes, I think that governance is no doubt the most important, and I follow the lead of strategic environmental assessment is really incorporating can really incorporate the other scales. This said, I think ecosystem services should be paying attention, and in the future they may be relevant. Thank you.
Thank you. Adele, last words?
Yeah, no, I just want to agree with what everybody else said. It's it's interesting to see that they have like that everybody participating has ranked those three as the top, because that would be what I think most people have said they would agree with. And but I would agree with Maria as well in that ecosystem service, I think, plays a very big part and will be whenever we're looking at ecosystem-based management in terms of MSP in the future.
Okay, so I think we are good to go to the next question, to the next answer. So the question was, in which step of the maritime spatial planning process would you conduct cumulative effects assessment? You could choose two options, and I'm getting old and I don't see very well, but what I see here is that most answers have gone to in the diagnosis phase as part of the inventory of current distribution of activities and their pressures. So that was the main answer. Then immediately followed by when designing scenarios to inform the selection of the preferred one. And lately on in the framework of strategic environmental assessment. Also you have inputs on others, but I don't see here any one, neither on the Zoom chat. So as this was on the communication of Monica, and she already told us that one of the obstacles is not having standard methodologies, or at least a common standard framework. Would you like to comment on this, Monica, and on these three phases, on these three steps that people have chosen?
Well, in my opinion, I agree with the cumulative effect assessment. It's proper in diagnosis phase because of try to ensure the interactions between human activities and how is the state of the marine ecosystem. So it's necessary to do a diagnosis to how is the situation at the moment, to trying to make that kind of scenarios, or try to focus how will be the potential activities in the future for that area. So I agree with that.
Good. So again, I will ask for the other speakers to join this, and I will now give the floor. Let's go by the same order. Maria de Luz, do you want to add something? What do you think that this diagnosis phase as part of the inventory of current distribution of activities and their pressures is the most important step to use to conduct a cumulative effects assessments?
Yeah, in general, I agree with what Monica said. I think it's really important to use it since the beginning, and then adapt it as the time moves on and you have more information to fit the model, update it according to with the information that you are having in general. Yeah.
Okay, so let me put the question in another way. As Monica has spoken to us about difficulty of not having a common or a standard framework, methodological framework, should cumulative effects assessment be conducted in a standard process? Should it be a step-by-step approach as the MSP process, starting with these diagnosed phases? I don't know if I put it clear. So my suggestion was that even though we don't have standard methods, could we have a standard timing approach? What do you think, Adele?
Yeah, I would agree with that, Helena. So it should be, like you said, part of the MSP process, so that it's written into the directives, that people know when they do their EIA. And I agree with that it is the right timing which to do it, to get a baseline to see what the impacts are and where the cumulative impacts are, so you can then plan for the future and plan areas for MSP for future development, so you can kind of manage what you have. You need to know the current status of it before you can then plan ahead for the future. But I do think it should be included within the MSP process. But I also agree that it's very hard whenever there is no standardized MSP or CEA. Sorry, I'm getting getting tongue-tied with all the different acronyms. Yeah, it would be good if we had a standardized CEA process, but I do agree that it should be embedded within the MSP steps.
Okay, so just one more last question on these results. We see here that designing scenarios, it's the second choice, and probably it's biased because I do love designing scenarios. So I would ask to our last speakers, Adriano, Marta, and well, Christina, if you want to jump in, that's okay, I think. Would you agree that this is a very important stage to perform cumulative effects, or at least to inform them and to illustrate the storylines of the scenarios?
Well, actually, despite the fact that I do agree that it's important to undertake cumulative effects assessment in the diagnosis phase, I think that if we only keep this exercise to this stage, we might be missing the potential of these tools to predict the future and to actually plan for future activities. So I think that using this all along the process, and also for designing scenarios, and to see if we, for example, if we have a tool that is able to accumulate potential activities in order to better have an understanding on where we should place them, I think we might be missing a lot of potential if we don't use the cumulative effects assessment in the designing of scenarios. So I also think that it's very important to use these tools to design the future trends.
Okay, thank you. Anyone wants to jump in? No? Okay, so Christina, you had your hand raised.
Thank you, Lena. Thank you. No, I was just saying that I totally agree with Adriano. Planning at the end, you plan for the future. You don't plan to stay as you are, right? So besides using a cumulative impact assessment for the current activity, we need to also embed it in the design of the scenarios. So at the end, a scenario is to assess what will happen if we plan these activities or those activities there. So we will want to know which will happen also with the environment and with the impacts. So I think it's something that is also kind of lacking in some of the MSP processes, the design of a scenario. So yeah, I was really interested in seeing which answer we will get for this question. So thank you very much.
Good. So yeah, so if no one wants to jump in to add anything more, I don't see hands raised. Let's go for our next question, which was on cross-border cumulative effects assessment for the Northwestern Iberian Peninsula. So it will be on Adriano and Maria da Luz to comment. And the question was, what would you do if you don't have enough data to conduct the analysis? This is the 1 million question. And so the answers have fallen on use proxies, expert opinion, and estimations on almost 60% of the answers, which is quite good for me. It's one of the best options. The second one has fallen into still conduct it, acknowledging data gaps and interpreting accordingly. And that we might comment on this because how do we do this? How do we assure that this has been weighed enough into our process? And then the last one is wait till I get all the data. Better not to give results than to give false results. So we can also comment on this. Sometimes it's better to wait to have more reassuring data, or when decisions are needed, should we go ahead and support decisions with what we have. So I will go to Maria da Luz and Adriano. Can you please jump in and comment on this?
Yeah, sure, of course, Elena. Thank you. Yeah, I would say that a little bit of all of them may be true, of course, but I personally do agree that it's better to use proxies, experts, and or estimations, but really acknowledging data gaps and interpreting accordingly is also really relevant. So I think that when we are providing information, and maps are powerful information for the eyes, maybe we should always put aside an uncertainty map showing what the degrees of certainty that we have about the information we are sharing. Because in the end, what we are doing is a representation of the reality, is not the reality. And we are providing this information as decision support tools, of course, for the decisions. And they should be aware of the limitations that this information provides. So this is really important. Nevertheless, I think it gives us a glimpse of reality and a glimpse perhaps of the future that cannot be neglected, because it's really powerful. Yeah, Adriano, do you want to?
No, I fully agree with you. I'm just saying that at the scale that we work, we will never have the picture of reality, especially, for example, in areas such as Portugal. We have a huge, vast area to plan, and we will never have exact real data. We will always have to rely on proxies and estimations. I think that it's what you said, and we need to balance all this stuff and basically be very humble when we interpret the results and build up on the. It's impossible to give a solution right away. We need to keep building the methodology and the results as long as we have the information, and make the tool as flexible as possible in order to incorporate the data that keeps coming to our laptops.
Okay, could we have comments from the other speakers? Because I think this is really an interesting question, because that's common to all planners. So Marta, Adele, and Monica, would you like to jump in, please?
I just wanted to say that I agree with Adriano and Maria de Luz, because I think it's a combination of the top two that come out there, because you're never going to have enough data. No matter what you're trying to do, you'll always want more. You'll never be able to fill all the gaps, but you still need to undertake the analysis. So I think using the proxies and expert opinion and estimations is usually the best that we can do, but we do need to acknowledge that that's what we've done, and that there are gaps in the data. And I really like Maria's idea where you're telling the people that you're doing this analysis for, or the decision makers, that how much confidence you have in your data and how much confidence you have in what you've used. So as long as people are aware, then they're able to make the best informed decisions based on the available data. If we waited to have more data, we'd never get anything done.
Okay, Marta, you wanted to say something?
I was just about to agree with everything that the speakers said. I think even if the selection of the best methodology might not be easy and might not be in accordance to everyone, I think it's quite uniform that waiting for the data is not an option. Sometimes data just don't get, and the decisions are taken day by day. So we need to do something, and to do it the best way that we can.
Okay, Monica, do you want to add something, or shall we?
Well, I completely agree with all the comments for the panelists. So just to say that I agree that it's a combination of both of the answers, and try to use the best data available and be sure that what are the sources that are you using for the data. I think probably the biggest problem will be in a transboundary way when you're trying to analyze data that are combining from both 2-3 countries probably, and it's not easy because there's not the same data for both countries, or in the same scales to be used. So that's another problem.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, on that sense, I might drop a note that there is a working group on data that is producing some very good outputs. as you might know. And we will be hearing from them soon. Adrian, you have your hand raised?
Just to add something, just because of the transboundary issues of the methodology, I just want to say that despite the fact that we all know that, for example, our cumulative effects assessment in the transboundary environment have limitations and is still in a very early stage, just the fact that we had this exercise with both countries, sharing data, sharing experiences, and sharing this brainstorming regarding this cumulative effects assessment has done a lot for the development and to increase the awareness of what's happening in both sides of the border. And sometimes this makes a lot in terms of I would say science diplomacy or science cooperation. So I think this is very important to have this kind of exercises between countries. Sometimes this does much more than years and years of transboundary consultations in terms of institutions. So that's what I would just want to say.
Thank you, Adriano. I like that new concept of science diplomacy, which I think it's very much true. That's what I've sensed on the MAS project. And I do agree that sometimes these common exercises make more advances on transboundary cooperation than actually going through the channels of the ministers of foreign affairs, etc., etc. I totally agree with it. I think that Portugal and Spain have actually done a very nice work and advancing a lot in transboundary cooperation through their common projects. But again, we need this to be scaled up to, or not scaled up, we need this to be uniform throughout the EU. And I think that that working group on data is actually something that we should go and put our input, especially people like you and all the panelists here that have worked on transboundary, because it's really important. But yes, I like that science diplomacy. Let's attribute that to you, and hopefully in the future we'll have a whole new world on this science diplomacy. Okay, let's go to the last answers on Slido, and that was referring to the last presentation also. But of course, I will ask all of you to jump in and comment on the results. And the question was, in your opinion, what qualities need to have cumulative effects assessment to inform a maritime spatial planning process? And you could choose two. And here what I see is that again we have two answers that reunited the same amount of votes, which is easy to interpret, understand, and communicate, and standardized methodology that we have at large addressed here to be comparable at the transboundary level. So those two are the ones that have 80% of the votes, and then driven by the precautionary approach, 40%, and as much detail as possible with 10%. Now, we have spoken about this standardized methodology to be comparable at the transboundary level, so we have addressed this. I would ask Adele to comment on these results as we are reaching the deadline of our presentations. Adele, very quickly.
Yeah, well, I'm not really surprised to see what the results are, because I think that would be my top two, definitely. And I know Monica's has been talking quite a lot. It's always been mentioned about standardizing the methodology, especially when you're working at transboundary level. Two different countries with a shared border, doing this kind of method, these assessments with using completely different methodologies makes it really hard for marine spatial planning and management. Then I also agree that they do need to be easy to interpret and understand and communicate, because it's okay for the scientists and people undertaking them to understand them, but these have to be communicated to the end users, who are going to be the government departments setting the legislation and making all the decisions in terms of marine spatial planning. So yeah, I totally agree with that, and wasn't very surprised, but I think it's something that needs to be pushed forward. I don't know what level we need to do it for the standardized methodology, but it's something that needs to be highlighted and taken forward.
Monica, would you like to add something in here? Do we need a project for this standardized methodology, or at least a standard framework? I'm not very keen on having everything standard, because we need to give room to improvement and creativity, but at least the framework, should we have it?
Yeah, it's something that we could work on, to having any protocol at least. Standardized things are not easy, especially in having these different conditions from the Mediterranean, the Atlantic, that is sometimes is not easy to standardize, but we could work on it. So I think it's a good idea.
So does anyone wants to jump in and say something, or shall we proceed to?
I can just
yes, Adriano, please.
Small point on the one of the least voted the answers, which is as much detail as possible, because this is something that always come up when we talk to experts and stakeholders. People want to have things very detailed, but we work on a bigger scale. So I think that it's important to know that, for example, in our methodology, it's easier to go, for example, from what we have to have in detail, to see the detail of the impacts we have in one specific habitat, for example. This is the detail that we can have. And also seeing the picture that we have, to cross-check with the marine protected areas, and if there is any problems and we foresee problems of impacts in a specific area, it is possible to go further and deeper and detailed. So I think it's good to start with the larger scale and then go funneling until the detail that we need.
Okay, so anyone last thoughts? Very quickly, let's wrap up this, and I do have a challenge for you at the end, so don't go away yet, please. So we have gone to this these questions of cumulative effects assessment. We've spoken briefly of cumulative impacts also, and maybe one of these days we'll need to come up with clear concepts on this. Anyway, we want to, our worries about ecosystem-based management applied into or personalized into maritime spatial planning. I think we have very good results on SIMAtlantic project, and please go and see the documents that are there. I will certainly go. And we want to wrap up this by saying that we did not exhaust the team by speaking on data, uses and scales, by should we focus on species or habitats, should we focus on ecosystem services, what about the land and sea interactions, should we adopt always precautionary principles or standard methodologies, etc., etc. So my question, last question, is that you go again into Slido to see the question if you want to, but then go to the Padlet and you can continue the discussion. Adriano will be there, Maria will be there, I think, and some of the other panelists. And the question is, considering the state of the art regarding all the aspects of ecosystem-based management in MSP that were discussed, which is, in your opinion, the next step to investigate it further? So I will recall you that we had discussed a series of the still obstacles and drawbacks that we have, from the lack of information to how to address land and sea interaction, how to approach uses and scales, how to choose our focus, species, habitats, ecosystem services. We have, in this session, gone through a series of questions that still need answers. So go, and I leave this question to you. And there's a note there, narrow down to specific issues between countries. Okay, that's more easy to answer, now that we have a focus. And from my side, I want to thank you all for attending. Please stay on Padlet and continue these insights, which are hugely important for us as a community of practice and for the SIMAtlantic project. And thank you very much to the panelists. You've been very helpful, and go ahead. I see discussions coming in. Oh, that's great. So see, you are seeing live this answers coming. I hand it over to you, Christina. How do you want to proceed?
I think this, we don't have any more time. I really appreciate all your participation, and thank you very much, Elena, Joanna, and Oscar for the organizations, and all the panelists. Very satisfied and happy, and I hope you are too.
Okay, thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to everyone.